Welcome back. We're discussing biological males, or trans women as they're called, in female sports. And joining me again is Dr. Linda Blade, who's known as Coach Blade. Coach Blade, when this was happening, because you did a very good job of explaining the history internationally, nationally, of how this issue came to be. When this was first appearing on a national level a number of years ago, and you can give us insight as to when, you were a voice of, in my opinion, reason and obviously of concern, saying, hold on a second, this may not be great for women's sports. Can you shed some light as to what those conversations were and what the result of your advocacy was at that time?
Yeah, well, I was at a national meeting in Ottawa, and of course I was representing the province of Alberta in track and field, Athletics Canada meeting. And all the different provinces were there, and I was the only female representative as at the table. And so when we were told that we were going to be forced to have men coming into women's and girls sports, I sat at the table and looked at the guys around the table and said, this is crazy. You know, and I know every record, Olympic, world, provincial, school record shows that there's a difference between boys and girls. You know that this is going to be sex discrimination against the female athletes if you allow men and boys to self-identify. And they all just looked down at their hands and they wouldn't give me an explanation. And then I took the president out to dinner and said, why are you doing this? Like, this is crazy. And then he wouldn't answer me. And then I said, oh, I know, because you're worried that a trans person is going to sue our association. And I said, but if that's the case, don't you think there's many, many, many more women and girls who might sue when they've been discriminated against? And he literally said, and I quote, girls wouldn't do that. So they're running on the assumption that female athletes won't sue. It's just
that's
unbelievable.
Wonderful.
Sorry,
that's so absurd. I can't believe someone said that. That's wonderful. Really? Okay. Sorry, lots of sarcasm there for our viewers. Atrocious. All right. Okay. And that was which year?
That was 2019 by the time I had that conversation. Yeah.
And so since then, of course, we've heard of Leah Thomas, the transgender female swimmer who's taken out top athletes, female athletes. We've seen a lot of, and pendulum, and we're going to get into the pendulum swinging in a moment. But I'm always curious as to how this is allowed in America, where they have Title IX, which guarantees equality of sexes. How does a transgender athlete, a male, biological male, going into women's sports, how does that satisfy Title IX, or does it not?
Well, because in his first day in office, Joe Biden put out an executive order that said, for the purposes of Title IX, the word sex would be replaced by henceforth meaning gender identity. So basically, he didn't take the word out of Title IX. He redefined the word. So he basically said that now if somebody says what their sex is, you have to believe them, and that's how they get around it. Through executive order. They haven't changed Title IX. They haven't legislated it. They haven't, it's just, so now what happens, and the same thing what happened with Trudeau and Bill C-16, the minute you say something like you can't discriminate on the basis of gender identity or gender expression, it's up to bureaucrats to then interpret what that means. And so then there's some states or schools that are interpreting it to mean, no, the guy just stays in men's sports, but they respect him. That's how you don't discriminate. Whereas a lot of others are woke and they're just saying, oh, no, yeah, they can come into the women. We should all be welcoming, all inclusive. And the thing is, when you call that inclusivity, that kind of inclusivity excludes women and girls from their own spaces and sports. So there is a clear conflict of rights when you do that. So anytime you mix sex and gender identity, you automatically set up this conflict between males and females.
And do we have the reciprocal happening? So do we have trans men, so biological females identifying as men, trying to get into men's sports? Is it a balance?
Well, there are some I know who've tried and they don't win, so you never hear about them. That's the whole point. That the reason we're hearing it's all about the men who transition is because they win. So because we all know that it's the truth, that if a guy comes into one sports, even if he's really mediocre athlete, terrible athlete, but the male advantage, like I've always said, it's two different models. It's like putting a Formula One car in a NASCAR race. They're two different bodies. They're models. It's not like, they like to say, oh, you're just saying women aren't good enough. I'm saying, no, we're a different vehicle. We're a completely different category of vehicle, and we need to have our own race. That's what we're saying. You can't just flip cars in different races and different categories. Like that's then undermines the whole meaning of it.
Now, when we come back from commercial break, we're going to discuss how it seems the pendulum is shifting on this issue. We'll be right back.
Yeah.